I think there's a big shift in our society and generationally as well of asking more questions, being far more curious about our health, getting in the driver's seat and wanting to have an active role in our health versus like seeing my parents and my grandparents that I'm lucky enough to still have with me here. They have a completely different mindset when it comes to going to the doctor and just what does the doctor say? Do what the doctor says, and it's a figure of authority figure to them, and so you show respect and you don't challenge them. And I feel like yes, I'm agreeing with you, there's such a shift happening, and I think it's so powerful and wonderful to see people really advocate for themselves in that way where they are being far more responsible for their health rather than letting it get to that point where it manifests into a really severe physical illness of some sort.
This is the Energy Within podcast, all about accessing, nurturing, and building your energy and the confidence to truly be yourself and step into your purpose. My name is Carrie Jokala. I am your host. I am a Reiki master teacher, a fitness instructor, a wife, a mom to 2 little boys who you will definitely hear on this episode. So today's episode is going to get much more scientific than any episode I have brought you before, but I think it's so highly important that we take a look at these things, and it was perfect timing that Janessa and I connected again about bringing her back on the podcast. I'm bringing back Janessa Finley, who a while back, and if I remember to do so, I will link her previous episode in the show notes. But she came on to talk about her healing modality that she uses, and it's all like energy, psychology, and really interesting. If you haven't listened to that episode, I highly encourage you to. But she is also involved in functional medicine. So I've brought her back to discuss how understanding your blood labs can help you with your energy. So we really, I'm sure, just touched the tip of the iceberg, but once we can figure out what's going on internally, because it's so different for every person, then we can really have a better plan of what to do to fix it. We can't neglect the physical because the physical is also real. So we can do all the energetic things and they can help, but as you'll hear Janessa and I discuss, we both kind of had the same thought, and it's all about how our bodies are designed to heal themselves. But sometimes we've gotten it to a point where we do need some help. So being able to go this route and figure out why our energy is off from an internal standpoint can be incredibly helpful and very empowering. So resources and how to contact Janessa will be in the show notes. If you do already have blood labs that you can grab and reference, go ahead and get those. If not, take some notes and mark down the things that you are going to want to ask for when you have your labs done next. I really hope you enjoy this episode and find it helpful. If so, please make sure that you share it. Tag me, tag Janessa, and let us know what stuck out to you. Janessa, I am so excited to have you back, and I'm so excited to talk about everything we're going to talk about, but we're just going to focus on one today. So thank you for coming back.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for having me. It's always such a great time to chat with you, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Yay. So why don't you start off, reintroduce yourself for anyone who might not know who you are?
Yes. So Janessa Finley. I practice functional medicine. I'm a blood lab specialist, and I also utilize energy psychology and mindset alignment to really allow people to strengthen the relationship that they have with themselves so that they can have deep compassion and love for themselves and their life and be able to share that with others. And then, of course, strengthen their relationship with everyone around them as well.
That all sounds so amazing. I'm sitting here like, wow, you do so much. So the first one that we're going to address today, so we're going to be doing not really a 2-part interview, but like 2 separate interviews, but we're going to talk about the whole blood lab side of everything. So tell me, you kind of take the reins on the beginning of this one and just explain how this connects to your energy and all that sort of stuff.
For sure. Well, our blood labs tell us what's going on inside of our body. And so it gives us a roadmap on how can we really be functioning at our optimum physical capability. And that is looking at those blood labs through a functional medicine lens rather than through the traditional standard Western medicine lens, where so many people still have symptoms, even though they go to the doctor, they have those labs ran. Their doctor takes a look at them and says, yep, these are normal. Can't find anything here, which is so frustrating and discouraging. The regular blood labs that our doctors use and interpret use the blood lab ranges, typically from the labs themselves, which takes 90 to 95% of the population as average to determine what those normal ranges are. So for me personally, when I look around at my peers and society, I don't want to be an average health of the people that I see living in America. And so I really want my body working optimally for me. This is what that functional medicine blood lab interpretation lens allows us to do. Get each person's body working to its optimum capacity.
Okay. So is it like the same blood labs that you would have run either way and just a different interpretation of it, basically?
Yes.
Okay.
Great question. And that's exactly what it is. So most people, if they're going and having a yearly exam or physical, their doctors are running most of these labs already.
Okay. So I should be going for more physicals than just asthma checkups, is what you're saying?
Well, I have to say, I haven't always been the best myself. And learning this approach really made me much more adamant about having my blood labs drawn and finding a doctor who will be a member of my team and not someone who's going to want to insist or dictate what I should do with my body. And so finding that right fit has been really invaluable for me. This has really changed my approach to my own health and wellness. And those regular labs that get drawn have a whole lot of answers for us when we know how to interpret them with that functional method.
Okay. So coming at this from the fact that I have not had labs done in quite some time, I don't know how much is actually covered, if it's worth going through a list or if you can explain even just a little bit of like what is covered in those labs, like what kind of information we're going to get just looking at the labs.
Yeah, I would love to share with you and your audience actually 3 specific ways to increase your energy. So they can pause this recording, go grab their labs if they have them. Once you get yours, you can come back to this recording and look at the numbers and compare. So typically what gets ran, well, I'm not actually going to go there because doctors do different things. So I will say on average, what I see people having taken readily available is a lab panel called the CBC. And the CBC with differential is a different lab, and that one is gold. So if you have not had your labs drawn, and this is prompting and motivating you to go get that information, make sure you ask your doctor for the CBC with differential. And we'll get to that in just a little bit of why that is so much gold and what you can determine from that. Other really valuable panels to have drawn is the CMP, or the Comprehensive Metabolic Panel. Having a thyroid panel drawn and not just the TSH is also really helpful. And getting an iron panel drawn, even if your red blood cells or RBC is normal, get it drawn anyway, because oftentimes doctors will look at the red blood cell count to determine if there might be any anemia, but that red blood cell count and some of those other counts, the hemoglobin, can be normal. They can look good. They can be in the optimal range. And there can still be iron deficiency in the body. Now, I'm mentioning this because it is such a huge source of creating lack of energy in the body. And so that's actually my number one point of the 3 ways to really tap into that natural energy that we have in us and have it at the highest level possible from a biochemical, physical standpoint, is getting oxygen to the cells. And iron is a big carrier of that oxygen for our cells. So having that iron panel and knowing whether or not there's any anemia happening within the body is really, really key. Before I get too far into my first point, CDC with differential, comprehensive metabolic panel, thyroid panel, iron panel. I feel like I'm forgetting one, but those will certainly cover everything that we are going to talk about here today.
Okay.
So oxygen in the cells. So we've already identified that having a depletion of iron in our body can decrease the amount of oxygen that's getting carried to our cells. And if our cells don't have oxygen, just like a flame, our cells can't do its job. The flame can't burn. Our cells can't do what they're, designed to do. And within our cells, if we go back to like 5th grade health class, you may recall something called the mitochondria.
Mm-hmm.
And the mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell. And that's where the ATP or energy is created. So at the very, very building block of our human body is a cell, and all of these mitochondria, like the factory, the energy factory, pumping out our energy. If they don't have oxygen, they're not pumping out our energy. So we have to ensure that oxygen is getting to our cells. We can determine that from our blood labs by looking at the red blood cell, the hemoglobin, the hematocrit. I'm not going to give ranges for those here today, but I do have a resource available that I'll make sure you share in the show notes so that if people want to get those specific numbers, they can click a link, watch a video, and they'll have it all at their fingertips.
Okay.
Those specific markers will both indicate not only potential iron anemia, but also B vitamin anemia. A lot of people don't know there's 2 different types of anemia. And the other, aside from iron, which is more readily known, is B vitamin anemia. B vitamin anemia, it's such a huge deal because going back to the cells and how they do their job, there's various amounts of different B vitamins, I think 16. And our cells need those different B vitamins as fuel to get the oxygen into the cell, to get the cell to do its job. So we're going right back to that same philosophy that if our cells don't have the building blocks they need to create the energy, we're not going to feel energy in our body. So we've got to get that oxygen into the cells and feed the cells what they need to do the job that they were created to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm listening very intently because I want to make sure I catch everything.
Sometimes I get a little too into the weeds with the biochem. So sometimes I have to check in to make sure I'm keeping it in a level. So to determine that iron anemia potential and the B vitamin with those markers that I listed, we're actually looking at the same markers, and whether or not they're high or they're low tells whether or not it would be potential iron anemia or that B vitamin anemia. So that's the first building block of any real healing from a physical level as well. The next point about how we can increase energy in our body is looking for low-grade dormant infections. But our body can't fight those infections off if it's not getting the oxygen to the cells that it needs for the cells to do their job. See how this all loops back around? Which is why it's so valuable to come at this with that functional medicine approach, where we're looking at the body as one whole unit versus selecting out an organ and saying this organ is ailing or ill, or there's a disease here, but the rest of your body is fine. Because if one part of our body is in a state of dis-ease, that's affecting the rest of our body too. It's not the only part of us that's out of balance. So yeah, coming into this with that vision that the whole body is interconnected and working with the whole body to be balanced has just incredible results that we aren't able to get with our standard healthcare. So looking at low-grade dormant infections, they are so very common and prevalent. And this is the gold that is contained on the CBC with differential. That's why it's so valuable to have the differential part of that blood lab, because you're going to find additional markers that tell us whether or not there are those dormant infections. Now, some people would say, if an infection isn't active in my body, then what's the harm? Well, from an energy standpoint, I know your audience is very in tune to energy. As like if there's a shark sleeping in the ocean at the bottom, and you may not see it swimming with the ripples of the water, is there still a threat there? Most likely,
Yeah.
right? There's still some impact on the ecosystem in that, body of water, what can thrive there, what can survive there, etc. It's the same thing with these low-grade dormant infections. Just because they may not be active enough to show up on a Western medicine blood lab result doesn't mean that it's not impacting your body, your ecosystem, and affecting whether or not you're surviving or thriving.
And I would think almost just the idea of having any infection, dormant or not, you would think most people would think like, well, I don't want that in there. That's not normal, right?
Yes. Yeah.
At least that's how I would look at it. Like, I don't care if it's dormant. Get it out of me.
Yeah, I feel the same way, 100%. But a lot of people are so shocked. Me specifically, I had mono when I was 14 years old, and the virus lay dormant in my system for over 20 years before I worked with a professional who looked at my labs through this type of lens. And while I didn't have the pain in my spleen or the swollen glands like I did when the mono was active in my system, I still had a lot of dis-ease or illness within my body, discomfort within my body that I couldn't rid until I got rid of that dormant or low-grade residual infection that lingered in my body. But it was mind-blowing to me that I could go to my doctor for 20 some years when I was regularly going to my doctor and be told, yeah, everything looks good. No, you're fine. You're really healthy. You go to the gym, you eat your chicken and your vegetables. You got it going on. You're good, girl.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel good though. And my symptoms weren't really entertained.
I've been hearing a lot of stories like that in recent years of people like speaking up more, both practitioners and just people who have had this experience with their doctor where like they get that feedback that like, oh, everything's normal, but something is wrong, but you just can't get any answers. Like, I feel like I don't know if it's more common or if just people are just speaking out about it more, but I've been hearing a lot more about that in recent years.
I think there's a big shift in our society and generationally as well of asking more questions, being far more curious about our health, getting in the driver's seat and wanting to have an active role in our health versus like seeing my parents and my grandparents that I'm lucky enough to still have with me here. They have a completely different mindset when it comes to going to the doctor and just what does the doctor say? Do what the doctor says. And it's a figure of, authority figure to them. And so you show respect and you don't challenge them. And I feel like yes, I'm agreeing with you. There's such a shift happening. And I think it's so powerful and wonderful to see people really advocate for themselves in that way, where they are being far more responsible for their health rather than letting it get to that point where it manifests into a really severe physical illness of some sort. So let's talk about numbers from the CBC with differential that will indicate whether or not you have a low-grade or dormant infection going on inside your system. So when you look at the CBC blood lab, toward the top, you're going to see a marker WBC, which is your white blood cell count. And from a functional standpoint, we want to see that range between 5 and 8. So that's going to be a smaller range than what you see printed on your blood labs, of course. And if it is below 5 or above 8, it does not matter. That is an indicator that there is some sort of infection happening within your body. Okay. So that's the first place that we can look to identify those infections. Then when you go further down the CBC with differential portion, you're going to see a neutrophil, lymphocyte, monocyte markers. And those are the next big three that we are going to talk about for infections. Oftentimes, they are printed in two different forms on the blood lab result. So there will be the absolute value, which is not what we're going to look at. So for anyone out there listening, looking at their blood labs right now, trying to sort through it, you want the neutrophil that has a percentage marker versus the absolute that's a decimal point. And the neutrophil, like happy place, sweet spot, where we really see people functioning optimally is at 60%. And if that marker is over 60%, then that's indicating there's a low-grade bacterial infection in the body. So we don't want that to be elevated beyond that 60% in an optimal state of function. And then the lymphocyte, which will be just under the neutrophil typically, or under the neutrophil absolute, however it's printed out, but very close. Wherever you find your neutrophils, your lymphocytes are not far away. We want to see that marker ideally be at that 30%. So again, if it's elevated beyond 30%, you're dealing with a viral infection of some sort, low grade. And viruses are everywhere. I feel like most people are always coming into contact and dealing with viruses. So it's not uncommon for the labs to kind of roller coaster with people who have felt really, really bad and they get multiple labs drawn and submit multiple labs to me. Sometimes they'll have a lab where everything does look optimal. And if you ask them, well, how did you feel that day when you went to the doctor? Do you remember? Their response almost always is, yeah, it was a good day for me. So these numbers are not necessarily concrete where they're at forever. Our bodies are always getting exposed to pathogens and fighting things off. And so we see that shift internally within our blood as well, from a good day to a bad day. It's pretty powerful. And then the monocytes is the last marker that we're going to talk about here today for low-grade infections. And the monocyte marker we optimally would want at 6% or under. If the monocyte marker is up above 12%, if you go in and have an EBV or Epstein-Barr virus, if you've heard of that, or mono, what I was commonly referring to as mono earlier, if you have that test run, you're likely going to have that positive result come back if your results on the CBC with differential is 12% or higher. So there's two more indicators in the CBC with differential, which we're not going to get into today, just because there's so much detail that we could dive into. So for simplicity's sake, we won't. But what I do want to mention is that with those 5 markers total, so with the neutrophils, that's been a mouthful for me today. With the neutrophils,
does Mercury retrograde affect how we talk too?
I think it does. I think it affects everything. Everything that has anything to do with technology and communication, Mercury retrograde, game over.
Communication, that makes sense. Okay. Moving on. Carry on.
Yes. So with the neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, and then the 2 additional markers of the eosinophils and basophils, they're in percentages. And if you add up those numbers, they're going to equal 100%, always. So it doesn't matter if your body is fighting bacteria, if it's fighting parasites, if it's fighting virus. As those numbers move toward what is my immune system fighting the most right now, you're always going to have 100%. I'm telling you this because as one elevates, so say you do have a bacterial infection happening and that neutrophil count is up around 70%, well, then something else is going to be low because it has to take resources from somewhere to fight off the bacteria. So as you go through your numbers, you might see some things elevated. And when you do, you're going to see other numbers low. That's just how it works naturally, because there's 100% of our immune system to allocate resources to whatever pathogen is coming into our body and affecting our health at that time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are ways to address and help alleviate these low-grade and dormant infections from just a nutritional standpoint with supplements to help our body fight off those infections. And if people are interested in the next step of what do I do now I found this infection, jump on over to the links in the show notes and there will be more information for them there about that next step, or jump over to my website, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to help walk them through and connect them with the best resource for their specific numbers.
Awesome.
So the third way to to improve energy in our body is that thyroid. And this is truly an episode all on its own, because there's so much about the thyroid to know, but there are so many people suffering with thyroid issues out there. And the way that it's being treated is truly an injustice to our body. It's just like not even reversed engineering. It is the best analogy I can think for it is telephone. Did you ever play telephone as a child?
Yep.
So the message starts out as, we'll just say, hey, thyroid, function optimally, right? So the first player in the totem pole sends that message. And by the time the thyroid gets the message, the thyroid is hearing, take a nap. And yet the approach is to try to wake the thyroid up on its own without changing the signals from the other players in the game of telephone, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so what happens is we give this medicinal treatment that is synthetic hormone to try to compensate for the hormones that are not being either made by the thyroid or converted into the usable form that the cells can actually access and use. And what happens is the hormones in the blood, because we're taking the medication, and it's like walking up to a car and pouring the gasoline on the car rather than in the tank.
Okay.
So we get those blood labs drawn, and yep, the levels look good, but you're still having symptoms because the levels look good due to the medication that you're taking that's in your blood. That does not mean it's getting into the cell. It doesn't mean the conversion is actually happening for the body to be able to use it. It doesn't mean that, as the telephone analogy so well depicted, it doesn't mean that upstream, the other parts that are influencing the thyroid to do its job are functioning at their optimal level either.
Yeah.
We're just like blaming everything on the thyroid that's at the bottom of the totem pole getting the wrong message.
Poor thyroid.
I know. So somebody's got to look out for the underdog. So what happens also with this synthetic thyroid hormone medicinal treatment is once that hormone is there in the blood, the thyroid recognizes, oh, hey, the hormone's here. So I can just chill. Like my job, I don't have to work harder because the thyroid, that hormone's here, whether or not I'm the one producing it. So I don't have to produce more. Let me just put my feet up and watch some TV and have a good time.
And take a nap.
Yes, exactly. So people typically, when they have these thyroid issues, are super tired. Maybe they're gaining weight. Maybe their hair is falling out. There's so many symptoms that come along with these thyroid conditions. And we're just not doing it justice by looking at the thyroid, prescribing a synthetic hormone, because it's just one piece in the system. And there are additional lab markers aside from TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, that tells us what's going on in that game of telephone and in the hormone conversion process. Because TSH actually is not even the hormone that's produced by the thyroid. TSH is a measurement of how much hormone is being secreted by the pituitary gland. Most people don't know that either from talking with their doctor. So we have to look at each marker to know specifically which gland, which piece of the puzzle is functioning optimally or not. So, yeah, those different blood lab markers will tell us which person in the game of telephone is working and which one is not quite pulling its weight. We also have that conversion happening from T4, which is the hormone that the thyroid produces. But for the cells to be able to receive and utilize the message, it needs to be in the form of T3. So, in order for that T4 to T3 conversion to happen, we have to have a healthy gut and liver. And so, we also need to be talking to people about those gut and liver markers that we're pulling from the comprehensive metabolic panel to have that overall full body approach to our healing and address every part of the body. And then, lastly, in this power thyroid session that we're giving here today, low-grade infections are a very common contributor to thyroid conditions, specifically thyroiditis driven by a low-grade viral infection. And so going back up the chain, if we have infections in our body that we're not addressing, we're going to have additional illness happening in our body, like the thyroid issues, or maybe it's joint pain for someone else. It's different for people, hormone imbalance beyond thyroid hormones, talking about like reproductive hormones. When people can't get those balanced and they don't know why, do you have low-grade infections going on that can really be inhibiting your body's ability to balance itself out. And our body can't fight off the infection if we don't have oxygen getting to those cells. And just like with the thyroid conversion, I want to also mention with the B vitamin anemia, it's not a matter of just saying, okay, I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to grab my B vitamins, or I'm going to eat these foods that are higher in B vitamins, because the B vitamins also go through a conversion process. We don't actually use the form within the cell that we eat. We have to convert that B vitamin into the form that the cell can utilize. So there's a specific way to be able to support your body in making that conversion of the B vitamins to get the energy as well. We have to have all these parts and pieces working to our body to feel our best. And I know it can sound so complicated. I know it felt super complicated when I was studying biochem, but it truly can be as simple as supporting our body with nutrition. And some of that is food. And unfortunately, some of it isn't food, it's supplements, because the density of the nutrition in the food we're getting these days is not what it used to be. And some of the products that I utilize also are sourced not here in America. And so we just don't grow them. We don't have a way to consume them because they're not available here. So yeah, those are the 3 ways that your audience can improve their energy based upon the information in their blood labs by solely pulling out those labs, looking at the numbers. Are they high? Are they low? Am I in the optimal range? How can I improve my health by getting my whole body moving in the same direction together, with each piece and part doing the job that it was so incredibly divinely designed to do?
Well, and I think to address the overwhelmingness of it all is knowing that like you can go get these labs, and then there's people like you who know what they're looking at and how to interpret it and what answers to give to help you move forward. So it's not like you have to sit there and figure it all out by yourself.
Absolutely not. And this is education, I think, should be included in our high school PE class, which is why I'm so adamant about giving the numbers, giving the information. And the first time you hear it, it can be a lot to take in, but you can replay. You can have those interpretations done for you exactly as you said. One of the other resources I have available is a class. And so there's a sheet, a blood lab cheat sheet, if you will, where the numbers are there. They can look at their labs. They can compare it to a piece of paper. It breaks it down. You have the visuals, makes it easy for those that want to do it themselves. And then it directs them to products that are going to allow their bodies to heal. and engage that innate healing capacity that we have within us. So there's lots of different ways to approach this, and you certainly don't have to go it alone.
Yeah. What's interesting too is just how I mentioned like all this seems to be coming more into the forefront, more into people's consciousness, more people are talking about it. And I remember I've been following this woman for a really long time, but I've never like worked with her. It's more that in addition to like educational videos, and she had some like really good recipes for like some healthy nutrition stuff that I would try. Like I never felt like I needed what she does because it was a lot of like hormonal and gut stuff. And I just remember at least a little over 10 years ago when she was first promoting like getting into liver health and gut health and all that kind of stuff and your hormones. And I'd read her emails, but I'd be like, I don't think that applies to me. And now I'm kind of thinking like, actually, it probably does. And I'm sure it applies to everybody, especially just with, like you said, with even just the way our food is right now and the nutritional, I don't know what the word is that I want to say, but the nutritional value of even what we would consider healthy food. Like you said, it's not what it used to be. I learned on another podcast that like, our strawberries are like, I forget how much sweeter, but like a bazillion times sweeter than the original from thousands of years ago because it's gone through so many changes for whatever reason. And it's different. So we're just kind of doing the best we can with what we have, but there's still more to look at.
Yeah, that's such a valuable point too. The evolution of not only the body, but then some of the influences of our own personal evolution based upon our environment and what's readily available, and living a fast-paced life and grabbing what's convenient and easy, which is not what's truly dense in nutrition and healthy and fueling, and being very intentional about what we're buying. And even the difference of organic versus not organic in our body and specifically our gut health is really astonishing when you start researching that. And then when you start researching gut health and the effects it has on the neurotransmitters. So if there's depression, anxiety in the body, brain fog, brain function, that ties into the thyroid, if my thyroid's working well, and on and on and on. Like so much comes back to that gut health. It's fascinating to study and learn how the body has been so divinely created to balance and counterbalance, because we truly are made to heal. It's just once we get so far out of balance, we need a little support and help to bring it back to that happy place.
Oh my God, you just took an exact thought out of my head that I randomly had yesterday. I don't even know why I was thinking about it, but I was literally that exact thought that like we're designed to heal, but sometimes that doesn't mean we don't need help sometimes, but like we're just created that way. Like we have all of essentially the resources, but yeah, we've just unfortunately thrown a lot of things out of whack with what's been made available to us and what we've used and eaten and other things that have just happened, I do have a random question. Again, because I have not had a proper physical or any blood labs. Is that always a part of a physical when you go to your doctor and you say you want a physical done? Like, is it automatic blood labs or do you have to ask to have them done?
I don't know
or
if
does
I
it
can
vary
speak
between
for what's standard.
Okay. So it could vary
so-
based on doctors and hospitals and whatnot. Okay.
Yeah. I feel confident they are drawing some labs, but which labs they're drawing specifically really can vary from doctor to doctor. So that's where advocating for yourself and knowing what you want ran and partnering with that professional who's going to support you in your own health journey is really important. I have had an experience with a family member recently that asked for some lab markers drawn, and their doctor said, you don't need those.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. And I have never had that response from my doctor, but I was very intentional with the doctor that I found who would support a more holistic approach to healing and not, this linear approach that is this lab indicator is here, then you need a chemical antibiotic or what have you. So that's very important. And there are coming to be more and more ways that you can get labs without a doctor's prescription or the doctor ordering them. There's more and more labs that are allowing people to go into the lab, pay for those out of pocket, get those ran. Even kits for at home. You can get at home kits for your vitamin D level and different things as well. That's a finger prick.
Yeah.
So there are more and more resources coming to us that allow us to get the labs and the information. It's our bodies and get that information on our own.
I shudder at the finger prick just because I don't do very well with needles.
Oh, I didn't either.
And
I had to do a lot of energy psychology work on myself to get over my phobia of needles. I used to pass out with flu shots, so I totally get that.
Well, yeah, part of it for me, this last cycle of stuff that happened when I was pregnant with JJ, when they were drawing blood for whatever they had to run a couple of times in the office, in the doctor's office, and the nurse would come in to do it. I passed out like both times. And then I was super nauseous the whole rest of the day. I couldn't do anything else the whole rest of the day. So when they had me come back for another blood draw, they actually called me in before they were really ready for me. And they're like, we need to see you. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, because of your history, we're going to send you down to the lab to have your blood drawn. I'm like, oh, okay. But I'm actually happy they did, because these were, not that the nurses don't do it on a semi-regular basis, but you go to the lab and that's all these people are doing. So it was very different. Like I barely felt anything. It was over super quick and I was fine. So I'm like, maybe you should have been sending me to the lab the whole time.
Yeah, whatever makes it easier, right?
So, oh my God, so much to process, but I'm very grateful for all of this information. And now I really want to find out about getting my labs done. So that's going to be my next step. Can you let everyone know how to find you, connect with you, if they want to work with you or ask more questions?
You can visit my website, www.fiercelyradiantsoul.com. And you can jump into our group coaching community where you can get those courses included that I talked about, being able to interpret your own blood labs if that intrigues you, as well as having that group support within those group calls and get all your questions answered there. Or you can also find the information to have a one-on-one blood lab interpretation and work directly with me. Both of those options are on my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janessa. This was super interesting. And yeah, I'm just ready for the next step. So
yes, get the numbers. And once you have the numbers, then there is a path.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. A lot to digest from that episode. So don't be afraid to go back and reference any time that you need to. If there's something you feel you missed, go back to it. And as with anything, take it one step at a time. Start at one point and go from there. Don't feel like you need to address everything all at once. And again, of course, if you're looking for that deeper help in reading the labs, in knowing what to do next as a result of understanding the labs, please make sure you reach out to Janessa. I would like to invite you to come do the Akashic Records Money Healing Sessions with me. It is a 4-part series designed to help you on an energetic level to take care of shifting your money mindset. We go all the way from past lives into aligning yourself with your future success. And of course, I always have the one-on-one Reiki sessions and the individual Akashic Records sessions available as well. So if you have any questions about any of those, please reach out to me. Make sure you hop inside the Energy Within Facebook group. Follow me on Instagram. And again, please share this episode if you found it helpful and you know that there are other people out there who need this information. Thank you so much, as always, for being here, and I'll see you next time.